Hello everyone and welcome to the MoeGamer podcast. I'm Pete Davison and I'm once again joined by my good friend Chris Kasky, and I'm also joined by my cat Patty, who has stolen my usual seat. So I'm sitting slightly to the right of where I normally am, which is nice. But anyway, how are you, Chris?
Oh, I'm doing great, Pete. How are you today?
Yeah, not too bad, aside from losing my normal seat. It's surprising what a difference it makes when you're sitting in a slightly different place to normal.
New perspective.
Yeah, new perspectives indeed. And, cat that likes sitting in places that smell of my arse, apparently. So
that's how they roll.
It is how they roll. Both of our cats are like that, and it's both adorable and weird. Because, like, if it was a person doing that, you'd be kind of creeped out. But if a cat does it, it's kind of cute. It's like, oh, they like things that smell of me.
Yeah.
But anyway, enough of that. So, our main topic for today, we decided we were going to talk about gory games, so that will be our third segment for today. Before that, we have our usual mix of news and what we've been playing, so we're going to kick off with some news then. So, what has caught your eye recently, Chris?
Do you want to just do the Persona dump right away?
Sure, why not? Okay, so, Persona 5 has been a bunch of sort of teasers and rumours recently, and we finally got some confirmation of what is going on. So, first of all, we got Persona 5 The Royal, which is what was previously known as P5R. That is releasing on October the 31st in Japan and coming west in 2020. And that is going to be an expanded version of Persona 5 that includes a whole new semester's worth of story content, so that's quite a significant amount of story. It's got a new major female character called Kasumi, who is hot. Yeah, I love her already. I don't care what she's like. She's just beautiful. Also, so there's some new content in the school. So there's a new character in the school who is a school counsellor who sort of talks to the characters after the incidents that happen early in the game. And there's some untold stories that include things like sort of New Year's shrine visits and all that sort of thing. So if you enjoy the sort of immersing yourself in Japanese culture side of Persona games, then there's going to be plenty of that, along with some new stories and presumably some new dungeons and bosses and stuff like that as well. So
yeah, some quality of life improvements too. I think they said that you're going to be able to use your cell phone to revisit previous dungeons or something.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. I've not read that, but yeah, that's cool because it's in its present form. It's quite easy to miss out on some treasures and stuff that might be quite useful. I mean, there's nothing sort of absolutely essential in any dungeons, but it's nice to be able to get some of the equipment that you can't get anywhere else, and not feel like you've missed out on stuff. So yeah. So this is basically going to be to Persona 5 what Fez was to Persona 3 and what the Golden was to Persona 4. So it's going to be a complete separate release. It doesn't sound as if they're doing like a downloadable expansion to the original. It's going to be a completely separate release, so you have to buy it again if you want to play it again. Or if you never played Persona 5 at all, this is going to be the way to play it. So, bear that in mind.
Or if you bought Persona 5 but never played it, now's a chance to sell your copy and get and hack a little bit off the price of Royal.
Yes, indeed. Or, if you're not bothered about the new stuff in Royal, you could probably get a perfect copy of base Persona 5 for not very much money after this as well. So
I know someone who's going to be parting with one for $20 soon.
Nice. Very good. All right, so the other piece of Persona news was P5S, which people assumed was going to be a port of base Persona 5 to Switch, which in retrospect doesn't really make sense because, I mean, why would they release an expanded version and then immediately re-release the original version as well? Because, I mean, Persona 5 wasn't an especially demanding game from a technical perspective, so, the additions to the Royal are mostly content-based rather than visuals. I mean, I think the new one's got 4K support, if I remember rightly, but aside from that, the actual tech that's running the game, the Switch could more than handle, because it's basically a PS3 game. Yeah. It is a PS3 game. P5S turned out not to be what people expected. It turned out to be an action RPG developed in collaboration between Atlus and Koei Tecmo and Omega Force, which basically means it's Persona Warriors, which I am ecstatic about.
Yeah. I'm the only person I know who likes this news better than whatever. I got a PS4. Give me Persona Muso now.
Yes. Yeah, so, I mean, details are pretty scant at the minute, but there is a brief trailer out there that shows Joker sort of fighting off shadows. It looks like he's actually fighting them off within Tokyo rather than in one of the dungeons from the game. But they're specifically calling it an action RPG rather than a hack and slash, so presumably there will be some sort of going around and exploring and perhaps some social link building and stuff as well. So it remains to be seen exactly what form that's going to take. But I'm just into the idea of Persona Musou. That's just enormously exciting.
My assumption going into this is that it's going to hew very closely to Dragon Quest Warriors.
Oh yeah, that would make sense.
That was the same verbiage they used with those games. Mm-hmm. They were very careful not to call those Musou games and not to call those Warrior games.
Yeah,
because they're Dragon Quest Heroes was the name of the games, right? And they weren't. They had very distinct elements. And the reason I also am imagining this hewing very closely to those games is those games had Monster Collection elements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and this is Persona. Like, there's gonna be monster collecting elements.
Yes, definitely. We've seen in the trailer that there is sort of the ability to unleash your persona and do attacks with that as well. So presumably that's going to be sort of an equivalent of maybe Musou attacks or charge attacks or something like that. So
sure.
Yeah, all very exciting. I'm just excited at the possibility of Persona's visual style combined with the sort of high energy gameplay of Musou games. So yeah, that's going to be a really great combination of things.
The music in the mix.
Yes, absolutely.
And I mean, the in the trailer, the cell shaded character models are lovely.
Yeah. So I don't think there was a release date for this, was there? I don't remember seeing one. Let me just briefly check the end of the trailer. No, there's just a teaser site at the minute, which is p5s.jp. So that's all in Japanese at the moment, but you can watch the trailer and sort of have a brief look at a few teaser bits and pieces that they put up there. But it's pretty much just been announced, so they haven't revealed very much at all yet. But more news on that to come very soon, all being well. Okay, what else has caught your eye lately?
Let's see here. Project Hardcore, which is now Hardcore Mecha, which is a Kickstarter project I backed quite a while ago. It's actually a game that's being developed in China, but it's won several awards at like various like independent game jams and like PAX and festivals and stuff. It's got a beautiful 2D presentation with kind of sprites that are built out of multiple pieces. So that they move in a very convincing, a very fluid manner, and it's kind of been compared to like the old Assault Suits Leonos games in terms of its like scale and the way it presents like robot action. So the good news is the developer Rocket Punch Games has partnered up with Arc System Works for publication and distribution. So it's always nice to see when one of these independent projects can partner up with a publisher with some clout. So there's no word of a Western version yet, but Korea, Japan, and East Asia in the summer. So if there's an East Asian version, it's very likely it'll be in English. Very likely it'll have a physical release, and very likely you'll be able to get it on PlayAsia or something. So very excited about this game. The designs for the robots are beautiful. The animation's really cool looking. The praise around it seems to be very well earned. I don't know how it plays yet, because I obviously have not been able to get my hands on a demo or anything, but I've just been enwrapped with the way this game looks for over a year now.
Yep. Cool. Yeah, well, I know you like your mecha, and this certainly looks really nice. I've not come across this before, but it looks really cool. It's got a really nice art style to it. So I can see why you're interested in that one.
Yeah, it's really cool.
All right, moving along, a few bits of Idea Factory news. So first up, Super Neptunia RPG has had its release date confirmed. That is coming to PC on June the 20th, and then PlayStation 4 and Nintendo Switch on June the 25th in North America and June 28th in Europe. If you have a look at Silicon Era at the moment, they've got a quite detailed breakdown of how the game works as well. So if you're interested in hearing how it plays, then have a look over there, and they've got some details on how the battle system and stuff works. So Looking forward to give this a go. As I said, I think last time, Japan hasn't responded all that well to this, but that doesn't mean that it's not a good game. It may just be a case of, Western developers made this, so it's obviously not as good. But you never know. You never know. I'm gonna give it a shot anyway, and I know you're interested in it because of it basically being Valkyrie profile.
Yeah, and just 2D. I mean, it's a 2D. If I get Vert in 2D, I'm gonna be really happy.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Yes. So alongside that, they've also, I think last night they revealed a couple of other release dates. So Data Live Reincarnation is coming out on the 21st of June in Europe. I don't have a North American date to hand, but 21st of June in Europe. So North America will be around the same time, I imagine. And Dragonstar Varnir's limited edition pre-orders will be going live on the 14th of May. And the limited edition for that will contain a steelbook case, a hardcover art book, an official soundtrack, a set of tarot art cards, and a collector's box. So pretty similar limited edition to the one they did for Death End Request, which was nice and not expensive. So
yeah, that sounds really nice.
Yeah, so soundtrack and art book are sort of the main things I look for in a limited edition these days, particularly the soundtrack. Mm-hmm. And the steelbook for Death End Request was really nice as well. So
I love a good steelbook.
Yeah, definitely. So
the steelbook for the new Mortal Kombat's ridiculously cool.
Yeah. What have they done with it?
Well, it's just black. There's nothing on it, and it has the classic Mortal Kombat sigil with the dragon right in the middle of it. But it's just indented.
Oh, lovely.
And then inside there's a golden magnet that is the sigil. So you can cool. you can take the magnet out and put it, and it fits in the indentation.
Oh,
on that, yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I like the sound of that. Cool. And I believe you're probably going to talk a bit about Mortal Kombat later, aren't you?
Yes. Oh, for sure.
Excellent. Yeah. Interested to hear in that. Okay, continuing with the news, what else have we got to talk about? Just a little thing, Raiden 5 Director's Cut is coming to the Switch in June, and it's going to get a physical edition as well, just like the PS4 version did, so that's exciting. The Switch version will be coming with a soundtrack CD as well. Which is cool, because the soundtrack for Raiden 5 is pretty cool.
Oh, it's awesome.
Yes. Yeah, not much else been revealed of that, but it's it's basically a straight port from the look of things with the additional content from the Director's Cut version. Because it first came out on Xbox One, and then the Director's Cut added a few extra bits and pieces when it came out on PlayStation 4 and PC, and now we're getting a Switch version, which is nice. What did you think of Raiden 5, by the way? I don't think I've really talked to you about it much.
I was actually just playing it the other day. I like it. I don't love it. I definitely like 4 as a game better.
Yes.
Maybe it's just because I'm grouchy and old, but I find the segments... like one of the things Raiden 5 does that's kind of new is it plays dynamically with camera. So there's zoomed out sections and sections that are a bit more zoomed in. And I find the zoomed out sections, like I can barely see the bullets. Like I find it very difficult to play it skillfully when it does that. It's cool from a presentation standpoint. I really like the game, but if you made me pick which Raiden I'd rather play 4. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm probably in the same boat, but there's a lot of things I really like about Raiden 5. Like I really like the sort of customizable HUD you've got around the outside of the screen.
Yes.
So, that's really cool. So you can do things like you can if you're score chasing, you can kind of analyze your score with a real-time graph. But also if you're learning the game, you can also get it to bring up hints and tips for fighting the various bosses and getting through various enemy waves as well. So it is a very difficult game, as you might expect, but it's also very friendly to people who kind of want to get better at it as well. So it's a really interesting game, I think. As you said, I think I prefer Raiden 4 as a game, but it's still definitely worth getting. And
it's wonderful.
And having it on the go with Switch will be lovely, because presumably they'll be doing a Tate mode with it as well for handheld modes. So.
I was going to say, if you get the flip grip, you can do the Tate mode, and that would be very cool.
Yes.
It's a lovely game. I really like it, and I hope everybody jumps on board with it. There's a lot to do. The progressive way the weapons level up, and the fact that you don't lose the weapon levels when you die makes it kind of feel a little bit almost RPG-ish, because you're making your choices as to which weapons you level up. There's lots of fun to be had with experimenting with the different weapon loadouts. Like it's a really good shooter. It's just not my favorite Raiden.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on, we've had a few more details about Criminal Girls X, or Criminal Girls Cross, whatever you want to call it. So we've had a few details about the gameplay. Apparently the battle system is VR compatible, which is bizarre. It's designed to sort of look like an FPS, but it still kind of follows the mold of the previous ones, where it's all about, rather than you issuing commands, it's the girls will give suggestions as to what they think they should do, and then you pick one of them and say do that. It sounds like it's going to be very true to the previous two games. They talked a little bit about the gameplay flow. So you go through battles, there's boss fights, there's a real world component as well, so it's not all in another dimension like or hell like the previous ones were. There's sort of visual novel style storytelling sequences, all sorts of things. Sounds like it's going to be quite an interesting game, and I have to commend them for the sort of business model they're doing for this as well, because although it's going to be a free-to-play game initially, they are taking to crowdfunding to produce a offline pay-once version. And the idea for this was from the developers. They saw some comments from people on Twitter who were sort of bemoaning the fact that once sort of online games as a service games and mobile games and stuff are shut down, there's no way to experience them after that. So and so they decided to do something about that with this game. And so they've decided to make this pay once version, but they've also realized that it would need to be kind of fundamentally different to the free to play version as well. So the crowdfunding attempt is not so much to raise money for the game as it is to sort of gauge interest in that sort of thing. Oh,
sure. I've seen that done before.
Yeah, so it hasn't started yet at the time of recording, I don't think. But there are some details on the Campfire Japanese crowdfunding site. So check that out over there if you want to find out a bit more about this. It's currently in development for PCs, Android and iOS. And there is the possibility of a Western PS4 release. And I assume that Western PS4 release will have a lot to do with this crowdfunding campaign, with there being sufficient interest in it, because that will obviously have to be a standalone version.
I forget who it was, but like a couple of years ago, there was a Kickstarter campaign that I was pretty big on supporting, and a lot of people were getting angry with it because it was from a developer who didn't really need to kickstart, but they were pretty clear that in explaining that like the way the current publication environment is, Kickstarter and crowdfunding can actually be a valuable tool in pitching to publishers.
Yes.
So kind of like what we just saw with when we were talking about hardcore mecha. A lot of these companies can take the groundswell of support from a Kickstarter campaign and make a case to a publisher that there is indeed demand for this product, and then that can open the door for published versions, physical versions, and console releases. So it often becomes a tool, an awareness tool, more than the money.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I'm all for this. I mean, I've said with regard to games like Grand Blue Fantasy and Fate Grand Order and stuff, those games have really great stories and really great artwork and music and stuff, and it's just a shame that in order to engage with those, you have to engage with sort of business practices and game structures that you don't necessarily like, and it's a bit of a shame. So seeing a company planning this from the outset, so rather than just sort of getting together in a mad panic at the end of a game's life and before it gets shut down, to think, oh shit, we should probably do a standalone version of this. They're actually planning this from the outset, which is really cool to see. So hopefully this will be the start of a new trend, but we shall see, I guess. Okay, you want to talk a bit about Way Forward?
Yeah, okay, let's do that, because this is really cool news. So yeah, there, a little while ago there was some talk of a copyright release for something that was called River City Girls that appeared to be related to Way Forward. And then the news came out that Way Forward has teamed up with Arc System Works, who now owns the Kunio-kun license, which we know in the West as River City Ransom. Yeah. And they're going to be working together to make a new River City game, River City Girls, which is exciting for so many reasons. Because Kunio-kun games are loads of fun. They're just great, cheeky beat-em-ups with really cool integrated RPG elements, like leveling your characters up and saving up money and buying items, which I love. Second, Way Forward makes the cutest girls ever.
Yes.
Third, like, Japanese delinquent girls is like one of my favorite, like, like favorite, like, aesthetic things ever. Like with the hats and like the long coats and like the, like, grouchy expressions and like cigarettes and like I love it. So like if theoretically we're talking about Way Forward making a beat 'em up with cute delinquent girls, like I'm done. Like this game is going to be great. Yeah. Like Way Forward a couple years ago did their take on Double Dragon, and it was wonderful. Double Dragon Neon was just incredible.
Yeah.
So I'm just imagining how good this can be based on how good Double Dragon Neon was.
Yeah, I always forget that was them, but yeah, it definitely was. And yeah, and they did a really good job with that, definitely. So this is very exciting, and also potential for like Shantae as an unlockable character or DLC or something. That's quite an appealing prospect as well. Or
maybe like Patty. Officer Paddy Wagon will come after you if you're bad enough. Like who knows? They could incorporate whatever they want, right? So, and because Arc System Works is involved, the likelihood of a physical release right off the bat is probably pretty high.
Yes, they've been really good with that over the last couple of years. So yeah, definitely, very exciting. Very exciting indeed. So not many details on this game just yet. So there's going to be more revealed later in 2019, whatever that means. But yeah, they have confirmed it exists. So
it's enough for me.
Yeah. Talking of beat 'em ups, you want to talk about the Capcom Home Arcade?
This is a nightmare. I never thought I would not want something related to CPS2 board games. But here we are in 2019, and Capcom has decided to make their very own plug-and-play. Because everyone has to have a plug-and-play, right? But I'll tell you what everyone doesn't have to have. A plug-and-play that costs nearly $300 and looks like it's a child's toy. And forces me to sit next to my friends so that our butts are touching. And it only has like 16 games on it. And it's it's like $300 and it has 16 games on it. Yeah. What are they? This thing needs to have the entire CPS1 and CPS2 catalog on it for that price point.
Yeah. So I mean, the way they've been trying to justify the expense is that the arcade sticks it's made of, they're really good quality parts, but I mean they're not $300 worth of good parts. They are just nice parts.
No, Senwa Denshi parts are inexpensive. If you go online and look up buttons for Senwa Denshi parts, they are not expensive.
Yes, but I mean there is sort of an expectation that if you buy an arcade stick with Sanwa Denshi parts, it's going to be quite expensive. People have sort of got that expectation now. It's a lot of people don't think to sort of look at the individual parts.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's why they think they might be able to get away with this. But yeah, there's all sorts of problems with this. I mean, one, the design is just horrendous.
It's hideous.
For those who haven't seen it, it's basically a massive lump of plastic in the shape of the Capcom logo with the arcade sticks on top of it, and it's just hideous. It's really, really horrible. And as you say, you can't split it in half So you have to like put it on a flat surface like an arcade machine and sort of sit next to each other or stand next to each other, which I guess is sort of authentic to the original. But the whole point of having these things in the home is so you don't have to deal with the inconveniences of arcade machines.
I was at an arcade last night, and let me tell you something. As a 34-year-old man, I hated my life. Me and 3 of my buddies were trying to play the original Turtles arcade game, ass to ass, shoulder to shoulder. It's fun when you're 8. Yeah. I don't want this in my living room.
Yeah. The other big problem with this is that the emulator that is running it is called FB Alpha, which is supposed to be one of the sort of the best way of emulating Capcom CPS1 and CPS2 ROMs. But according to the developers of FB Alpha, like the announcement of this product was the first that they'd heard of it being used in there. And so Capcom just thought, oh, it's a free emulator, isn't it? We'll just pop it in there and no one will notice.
Oh, did you hear it goes even deeper than that now?
Oh, does it? I didn't follow the rest of the story because I was
one of the guys licensed it to Capcom and didn't tell the rest of the guys.
Oh shit! Seriously?
See, so it's like there's like drama now. This thing is an absolute mess.
Oh no, that is a nightmare. Jesus Christ. But yeah, this is going to be an absolute disaster for Capcom. And after they've done so much good recently as well, after they've done so many good things with like Resident Evil 2 and Devil May Cry, I mean, I've got things I don't like about both of those, but people have sort of pretty well regarded Capcom recently, but sort of them getting back on form, and then they go and pull something stupid like this.
Why? Why isn't this a disc for my PS4? For God's sake. Like, everyone's flipping out because okay, let me just say one positive thing about this thing. Mm-hmm. It's the thing everyone's excited for. Holy shit, Alien vs. Predator in the home.
Yes.
That game is unbelievable. But why is this not a disc for my PS4 for $29.99 that I can go buy a Hori Real Arcade Pro 4K and just you can... Let me just reiterate. This thing costs as much as a game console.
And has 16 games.
You can
16 games.
You can go get a Switch and a copy of the Capcom Belt Scroller Beat 'em Up bundle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even on top of that, you could like get a few of the like downloadable arcade games that there are as well, and the Street Fighter collection. One thing I am glad about this, I'm glad it's not 16 versions of Street Fighter.
Yes, that's cool. but everyone's complaining about the version of Street Fighter that they put on it. It's not the one people want. So also, it's like they put the bad Mega Man fighting game on it, not the improved second version. This thing's a mess from like every angle. I know one guy who's excited about it, and he's excited about it for the only legitimate reason to be excited about it. He wants to hack it open, flash the BIOS, and put his like full MAME like collection on it.
Yeah, that'd be cool. And similarly, if someone can hack it to work as an arcade stick as well, that would probably be pretty cool as well. But I don't know how easy that side of things will be. But yeah, definitely hacking it open and being able to put your own ROMs on there and sort of actually make it a complete collection of CPS1 and CPS2 games. That would be great. Although you still have to deal with that hideous casing.
No, I don't understand who this is for. At this price point, anyone who can afford this has the consoles.
Yeah.
And can have the whole point of the plug and plays is they're small and travel easily, convenient, inexpensive, and loaded with games.
Yes, and this is none of those things.
I hate it. I hate how much I have to make fun of this thing. But as a Capcom fan, I will talk about CPS2 games all day long, like Cadillacs and Dinosaurs for life. But seriously, or was that a CPS1 game? CPS games, whatever. Love CPS games. But seriously, this thing is like a joke. Like, this thing looks like an April Fool's joke.
Yeah. All right. Right, the last thing I think I want to talk about then is that Mark Cerny from Sony had a bit of a chat with Wired recently to talk a bit about PlayStation 5.
That he did.
Yes, and there's lots of interesting details. A lot of it very sort of techie-minded stuff, as you would expect from a conversation with Mark Cerny. But I think sort of the key things that we can take from it that aren't sort of overly techie and boring are. It's going to be making use of SSD rather than hard drives, which speeds up loading times considerably. It's going to be backwards compatible with, at the very least, PlayStation 4. They haven't sort of confirmed whether they're going to do anything else with previous generations, but they have confirmed it will be backwards compatible with PS4 games. And they've shown things like Spider-Man running on it. I think they said it runs at up to 8K resolution, as if anyone cares.
Great.
Yeah, it's like
whatever. Like 8K resolution is just like your brain can't even comprehend that.
Yeah.
Like I don't even understand. Like even like 4K sometimes I'm like I don't know how much better this is than 1080p because I just can't perceive it anyway. Like 8K.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like the size of a football field.
Yeah. The other thing that they've said is that VR is going to continue to be an important part of what they're doing, and the current PSVR headset will be compatible with the new system.
Oh, that's great news.
Which is cool. But they've also suggested that there might be a possibility of an upgraded version in the future because of the new CPU and GPU in the console. It will be able to drive a VR headset that has higher resolution and that sort of thing. So
that's really good news.
Yeah, so that's nice. I mean, PSVR is by no means sort of a top of the range headset or anything, but it's perfectly adequate for what it does. It's got reasonable quality. It runs at 120 frames a second, so it's very smooth. And Sony's insistence that developers get stuff running well on there means that every experience you have on PSVR is going to be to a particular standard. So, and obviously PS5's additional power is going to make that even better. So. I'm
quite interested in PSVR, but all my experiences with it have made me uncomfortable because the resolution is just a bit lower than I need it to be.
Yes.
It's not from a judgmental standpoint. I get why, but I just literally it makes me physically uncomfortable.
Yeah,
like
I mean that's a common problem with VR in general. We're just now starting to get headsets that run at a higher resolution, and people are finding those a little bit more comfortable. Like my friend has just got this new system called the Pimax, I think it's called, and it's basically like a widescreen VR headset.
Oh, cool.
And so that gives you a lot more in the way of peripheral vision. The resolution is higher because it's sort of new technology. It's not really designed for your typical consumer at the minute. Like you have to do a lot of setting up to get it working at the moment. But once you get it set up, it works really, really well. And so sort of moving forward, as new companies start introducing their own headsets, like I think Valve has actually announced what their headset is going to be now as well. So it's going to continue to push things forward. And although PSVR is still kind of niche interest, it's done a lot to kind of raise awareness of VR games and convince companies that making VR experiences is worth the time and money. So
yeah. So basically what I'm hearing is if I get a better resolution VR headset on my PS5, I'll finally be able to play Astrobot, and then life will be good.
Yes, Astrobot is a thing of wonder. And I only realised after we finished recording our 3D Mascot Platformers thing that given that Astrobot was one of the things we said we should talk about, we didn't mention it at all.
Oh, don't even get me started about that. Do you know we went through an entire episode about choice RPG battle system mechanics, and I didn't mention Valkyrie Profile once? So there's so many topics we need to return to.
Yes, definitely. Okay, cool. Right, any other bits of news you wanted to talk about?
Just in terms of the PS4, Sony did say yesterday, though, that not within the next 12 months.
Yes. Okay.
So we're not looking at winter or spring. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking probably holiday 2020.
Yeah, maybe.
Winter time 2020.
Yeah. there's a lot of speculation on new hardware coming around at the minute. Like, there's been loads of speculation over Nintendo doing a new Switch.
Yeah, but they said they're not. But then whatever that means.
Well, they said that they weren't going to announce anything at E3. Is specifically what they said.
That's fair.
Whether that means that they're not doing anything or if they're just not going to announce it at E3 remains to be seen. But I mean, it's all speculation at the minute. There's no sort of confirmation. Whereas the difference with this stuff on PS5 is that this was an actual interview with Wired, with Mark Cerny. The things he's said are things that are going to happen. So that's what makes this particularly interesting. So
that being said, I do want that like Pro Switch. Like that everyone talks about. Like, yes, please. Let's see, what else? Oh, Experience announced a new dungeon crawler for the Vita, which is crazy. Mm-hmm. So Experience are like the kings of the Vita dungeon crawler, right? Demon Gaze, Stranger of Sword City. What's that one with the cool, like, zoomed in perspective? Ray Gigant. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they're making a new dungeon crawler. Azure Wing Chevalier, and cool. They're making a Vita game. I thought those weren't being made anymore. So I mean, I don't love Experiences games. I think they're all kind of cookie cutter, but it's cool that it exists.
Yeah,
and the art will be incredible.
Yeah, Experience artwork is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I've only played Demon Gaze to date, but Demon Gaze is a game that got me into dungeon crawlers, so I have to give it lots of credit for that.
Sure.
As like previously, I played some dungeon crawlers, but they hadn't really caught my attention that much. But I played Demon Gaze, and I was like, yes, this is a thing I like engaging with. Mm-hmm. And then I played Dungeon Travelers 2 and never looked back. So
welcome.
Yes. So yeah, I'm well up for this. I've actually got a whole bunch of Experience RPGs on my shelf that I need to get through at some point. I've got Demon Gaze 2, Stranger of Sword City, the 2 Operation Abyss and Babel as well. Those were there.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So yeah, I've got a whole bunch of those I need to play at some point. So I will.
I have Ray Gigant and I haven't played that yet. I bought that specifically because the artistic presentation is so strange.
Yeah.
And because Limited Run published a physical of it, and I was like, okay. But I haven't played it yet.
Alrighty. Okay, is that everything for now?
Yeah, that's everything that's important, unless you want to geek out about East some more. Like, every time East 9 news trickles out, but, like, we finally have official artwork of Adol in East 9, and people are like, why does he have black hair? Because he has, like, black and blue hair now. But then there's screenshots of the game where he does have red hair. So, like, I think it's all just, like, plot stuff. And, like, I think it's probably tied to, like, the whole prison theme of the game.
Yeah.
Like, he's probably dyed his hair to escape being caught, right? Because he's famous for his red hair. So I think it's probably plot related.
Yeah, it'll be either that or something to do with the monster side of things. When it like when he gets monstrous, his hair turns black or something like that. It'll be something. Along those lines.
There's like in all the pictures, he has the black and blue hair, and he's dressed really like conservatively. He's got like a gentlemanly look with like a scarf. But then there's shots in other art where he has the red hair, and then he's like in the armor with like a claw.
Yeah.
So it's gonna all tie into the plot and the mechanics, but Dogi confirmed.
Oh yeah, Dogi's apparently playing quite a major role in this new one. So
I think Dogi might be the main character of this one. I think there's probably a time where Adol's in jail or whatever.
Yeah. Well, all he needs to do is just walk through a wall, though.
Yeah.
That's what Dogi does, isn't it?
Punch it down. Yeah. So, wouldn't be an episode of this if we didn't talk about the latest East 9 trickles.
Indeed.
That's everything I got.
Yeah, that's everything I've got as well. So let's take a short break for now, and then we'll come back and talk about what we've been playing recently. So see you in a moment. Welcome back. For our second segment, we're going to talk about what we've been playing recently, or from the sound of things in our conversation in the break, what I've been playing recently. Have you been playing anything recently?
No, I don't play video games anymore. I just buy them and talk about them. No, like we kind of talked about last week, last episode, and I was talking about Pac-Man. My big thing lately has just been like, 15-minute decompress sessions before work. I've got a show coming up in August for my art stuff, so like my evenings have not been very conducive to gaming as of late.
Yeah.
But I've been playing a lot of Pac-Man DX again still. I've recently re-fallen back in love with Geometry Wars 3, which happens like about every 3 weeks. I reconnect with Geometry Wars 3, which is just, it's so wonderful on so many levels. So arcadey stuff like that. I popped in Raiden 5 the other morning because I realized I hadn't really played it nearly enough when it launched. But besides that, I've just been chipping away at Iconoclasts some more. Nothing really serious, to be honest.
Cool. All right, well, I guess it's down to me then. So, first one I will talk about, because I know you'll be happy about it, is Sonic Lost World.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Sonic Lost World, oh my goodness, what a wonderful game. What a wonderful, wonderful game that was. Yeah, so far, having played through most of the mainline Sonic series, with the exception of the handheld stuff so far, yeah, I think this is probably my favourite Sonic game so far.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
That's some serious business. It's definitely my favorite 3D Sonic game.
Yes, yeah. But, no, I just understand everything you were going on about in our Sonic episode now. It's just such a wonderful game. It's just so filled with joy of exploration and platforming, and it's got the Sonic speed in there. And yes, it does have a very different feel to a lot of Sonics, and yes, it does feel quite like a Mario game, and yes, it really sounds like a Mario game with that soundtrack. But yeah, it's just a exceptionally well-designed game with lots of really interesting things, lots of things to explore. It's been the only Sonic game that I've played throughout the whole series where I actually felt inclined and motivated to seek out all of the secrets and collectibles. So as I was going along and playing, so I started collecting some of those red star rings, and I sort of came to the conclusion as I was playing that sort of like the proper game in Sonic Lost World, the way to truly appreciate the level designs is going after those red star rings. Because they lead you in so many different directions that you can just easily run straight past. Like, there's so many levels in Sonic Lost World where you can pretty much run in a straight line from start to finish, but you will miss out on so much interesting level design if you do that. Yeah, and so I made a conscious decision early on that, yes, I'm going to play this through. I'm going to get all the red star rings and take it from there. And yeah, I feel like I had a really great experience as a result.
Lost World is... The way I always describe Lost World to people is that like 3D Sonic went in a very specific direction. Right, like the Sonic Adventure, and 3D Sonic has always kind of followed Sonic Adventure ever since. Lost World said nah and tried to do something different. And like, as much as I've always appreciated Sonic Adventure and 3D Sonic, obviously I love all those games. But Sonic Lost World feels like what I always wanted Sonic 3D to be. Like when I was a kid and like hoping there'd be a 3D Sonic game on the Saturn, like Sonic Lost World is the game I wanted.
Well, like what it feels like is they took the ideas from what was going to be Sonic Extreme and go, well, what if we actually made this?
Yes.
So like the idea of sort of the floating platforms and the 3D shapes and the abstract nature of it. Yeah, this was all stuff that they were going to do for Sonic Extreme.
Yep.
And didn't. But then they decided to give it a go in Sonic Lost World, and it works really well. And with the additional power of the Wii U over the systems that Sonic Extreme was originally going to come out on, they were able to do a lot more than they would have been able to do if it was a Saturn game as well. So, yeah. So it's a really interesting game, and I understand why some people don't like it compared to some of the other Sonic games. If you're going in expecting another Sonic Adventure style thing or another Boost Sonic type game, which I think is sort of the Sonic Adventure kind of evolved into Boost Sonic, which I think is where so we got Unleashed, Colors, Generations, and Forces all basically follow that model, whereas Sonic Lost World was doing something completely different with it. Yeah, and I think it was a really refreshing change. I like Boost Sonic. I like that combination of 3D and 2D that it's got going on. But yeah, it was nice to have something that felt completely different, that was just provided a different sort of gaming experience to the rest of the series. And yeah, I can understand why people looking for something might not have might not have enjoyed it, and certain things like the boss fights are all a bit crap. But
yeah, well,
aside
I feel
from
like
that,
boss fights in modern video games in general are crap. Like,
yeah.
When was the last time you didn't think that boss fights were just something you had to put up with?
I don't know, because I still quite enjoy boss fights as sort of dramatic moments, and
me too.
I've enjoyed the boss fights in Sonic Forces, which I'm currently playing through at the moment.
Yeah, some of those are quite good, except for that one against like the robot bee with Zavok. That fight sucked.
I didn't have too much of a problem with that, but there's one mechanic in that sort of, if you don't spot it straight away, then it will make your life hell. Which is just like when he slams into the ground, you have to not jump. Like, your natural instinct is to jump up and try and hit him, but if you don't jump, then you will get knocked into the air anyway, and that's how you hit him. But it doesn't necessarily make that very clear to begin with, and if you don't figure that out, then you will spend hours just going around and around the same attack patterns. But yeah, I quite like a lot of modern boss fights. I think the ones in Sonic Lost World, they just kind of didn't have a lot of impact, because there were some of them that you could finish in one hit. Like the final battle against the what's his name, Zavok from the Deadly Six, you can sort of finish the first phase with a single hit. If you lock onto him multiple times and just fling yourself at him, it's just over. And it's just like, this was supposed to be the climactic battle of the entire story, and yeah, you just twat him once and he runs off, and you're like, okay. But
I did really like that one fight against Robotnik when he's like in the version of his robot and it has like the big demon wings.
Yes, yeah.
That's pretty early in the game, but that fight was cool.
Yeah. Yeah, the final Eggman fight is pretty cool as well. It sort of has some callbacks to some of the boss fights in Unleashed, which kind of have almost shoot 'em up type elements to them.
Oh, that's cool.
Like, where he's like sort of shooting bullet patterns at you, and you've got to dodge them and sort of maneuver between things before sort of striking at the right moment. So yeah, the actual final battle in Sonic Lost World is really cool. But some of the other ones before that are not great. But I mean, they don't detract from the experience as a whole, because the experience as a whole is mostly about all these interesting levels that have a nice mix of 2D and 3D. Some are exploration based, some are dexterity based, some have a bit of both, and yeah. It's just been a real pleasure to play, so I'm glad I finally took the time to play through that.
No, me too. Were you able to play the Zelda DLC level?
Yes. The Zelda and the Yoshi story and the Knights DLC. They're all wonderful. The Yoshi one in particular is very, very true to Yoshi's Island. It's an absolute delight. And yeah, I was very pleased to discover that. Yeah, the copy I got was actually a second-hand copy. But the Knights DLC code in it still worked. So whoever had it previously obviously didn't redeem it, so I was still able to get hold of that, which was cool. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's Sonic Lost World. As I say, I've also been playing Sonic Forces a bit as well, which is that's a cool game. I'm enjoying that so far.
Yeah, I like it too. I like it a lot, actually.
Yeah, it's back to the Boost Sonic formula, as I said before, but then you've got the addition of Classic Sonic, again, like in Generations, and then you've got these avatar stages as well that you play with your custom character. And so there's a nice mix of different gameplay styles in there. So I really like that the Classic Sonic stages, they seem to have kind of upped the emphasis on the kind of momentum-based stuff that some people thought was a little bit lacking from Generations in a few places. But yeah, there's definitely the feel of old school Sonic doing things like sort of struggling to get up hills and stuff like that. So they've done that really nicely. I love what they've done with the music in the classic Sonic stages as well. So they're all original compositions, but what they've done is they've used the MIDI sound set from the original Sonic game. So you've got like the original instrument sounds and that distinctive drum sound that Sonic games on the Mega Drive used, and yeah, it just it looks like a new game, but it sounds like an old game, and it's great. I love it. And the cheese factor. Oh my god, I love the cheese factor in this game.
Oh, I know. Sonic cheese is particularly delicious.
Yeah, just like anytime your avatar is doing something cool with Sonic, and like the lyrics kick into a song or something, and it's like someone's singing about fighting and unity and teamwork and like love and friendship and that sort of thing. It's just like, yes, this is exactly what I want from this.
Can we just talk about forces in general? Like from a narrative perspective, like the dark, like forces starts and like Robotnik's already conquered the world and Sonic is dead.
Yeah.
And like you're in mourning and like Sonic is dead, but we still have to fight on anyway. But then Sonic is not dead, and then like the triumphant return of like Sonic to everyone's lives as a Christ figure reborn.
Yeah, oh, it's great. It's great. It's sort of the kind of the natural end point of the whole sort of technology versus nature thing that the whole series has had going on from here. It's I guess in some ways it's kind of an evolution of the Bad Future stuff in Sonic CD.
Yeah, all of Forces is Bad Future, right?
Yeah. But yeah, just sort of seeing things like sort of like you go through Green Hill Zone several times, but Green Hill Zone has been so sort of torn up by Eggman and stuff that parts of it have turned into desert, and like there's sort of burnt out dead trees and stuff around the place, and it's like this familiar environment, but there's stuff there that's unfamiliar as well. It's like this is not the Green Hill Zone you remember. I did find it funny that they specifically acknowledge how long Sonic has been running now. So like there is a line where I think Infinite says to Eggman that Sonic has been beating him for decades, but yet Tails still sounds like an 8-year-old girl.
Did they actually say that? Like, did they say Tails sounds like an 8-year-old girl?
No. That was my interpretation. But yeah, Infinite does specifically say that Sonic has been beating you for decades at this point, and so you just naturally think, well, this is like, well, why hasn't Tails grown up at all in that time?
Yeah. I really appreciate Forces a lot.
Oh yeah, and there was also the line where modern Sonic and classic Sonic first meet each other, and his first line is, "Oh, it's been generations since I've seen you," and you're like,
"Wah wah."
So yeah, I'm enjoying that at the moment. There'll be a write-up on that probably next week at this rate, and then I will crack on with Mania, and then that will be Sonic done and dusted for now. That's until awesome. I decide to go and do the handheld games, which I'd like to at some point, but I'll probably take a bit of a break before then.
You do know the magic of the first Sonic on the Game Gear, right?
Oh yeah. Yes.
Do you know who developed that shit?
Yes, I do, and I know who did the music as well.
Yeah, it's something special.
Yeah, definitely. Back when I started the Sonic the Hedgehog feature, midway through last year, I've sort of picked it up again recently. Yeah, I went through and I made a specific effort to have a look at some of the Sonic games that don't often get talked about, like the Game Gear games. So there's the two mainline Game Gear games, and then there's all the sort of spin-off ones on Game Gear as well, like Sonic Chaos, Triple Trouble, Blast, and the Tails games as well.
I was going to say that like pseudo RPG Tails game is really cool.
Yes, Tails Adventure. That's a really, really cool game. And the weird sort of vaguely shoot 'em up one as well is quite an interesting game. I'm not sure it's good, but it's certainly an interesting one. There's some really interesting mechanics and sort of use of physics in that one. So yeah, check out my Sonic feature on MoeGamer.net to find out a bit more about that. There's definitely some really interesting games that don't get talked about anywhere near enough recently. Okay, so other things I have been playing recently is those who follow me on Patreon, or are good enough to give money to me on Patreon anyway, will know that I've kind of had a bit of a hunger to get back to some Final Fantasy recently, and mostly inspired by watching some Let's Plays by Pro Jared. I've watched his playthrough of Final Fantasy 1 and Final Fantasy 3 recently, and I thought, I want to do a Final Fantasy marathon. I've been wanting to do this for years, sort of start at the beginning and play all the way through. But one thing that people never do with these Final Fantasy marathons is they never include the MMOs in there. They never include 11, they never include 14. And so what I thought I would do is that rather than necessarily going straight through in order, I would make a start on 11 now, because I know that 11 is pretty long in terms of story with all the expansions it had. But I also know that everyone who has played through 11's story say that it is one of their all-time favourite Final Fantasy stories. And so
that's cool.
And so I was very keen to play this. And the nice thing about playing 11 in 2019 is that pretty much 99% of the game can be played completely solo. So there's no need to rely on other people. There is, for those unfamiliar, Final Fantasy XI launched in 2002, and it was an RPG modelled after the EverQuest mold. So this was well before World of Warcraft, which wouldn't come out for another 2 years after Final Fantasy XI. And so it was done in the EverQuest mold, in which sort of partying up with people was absolutely essential. Otherwise, you would get your ass kicked by like the most basic of monsters. Which, I mean, in some ways it was fun because it made you meet people, and certainly when I played Final Fantasy XI for the first time, back around the time that Rise of the Xylat came out, which was when it first came west, I think, just after its first expansion was released. Yeah, I had some fun. I made some good friends there, but it was so time consuming. There was a lot of downtime in that game. There's a lot of sitting around shouting for parties to come and recruit you, and like there was always the old MMO thing of the meta, like if you didn't have the right job, then parties wouldn't want you and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It was a real pain to get through. And so a few years back, they introduced this system called Trust. And Trust is a system where you can basically recruit NPCs from around the game world. And there's like 110 of them altogether.
Oh, wow.
So, and you recruit them in various ways. So initially you recruit them just by sort of signing on with this trust initiative thing. So the concept of trust is that rather than the actual NPC coming with you, you're casting a magic that represents your kind of bond of friendship with this person, and it summons forth like an alter ego of them, like a sort of artificial, magically created version of this person. And so obviously you have to establish a relationship with these people beforehand. So the first one you meet is like the secretary who's running this system, and she's a white mage, and then she points you in the direction of someone else you can talk to. And there's like a catgirl thief living in the town of Windhurst who, if you do a quest for her, she will let you summon her as a trust, and so on. And
then you can stop because you have the best one.
Exactly. But yeah, as you work your way through the game, you acquire more and more of these trusts, and you can basically use them to build a party with. And so stuff that you would have previously had to recruit other players for, you can now just summon these trusts instead. And they are very competent at what they do. So they all have like one of the specific jobs from Final Fantasy XI, of which there's quite a lot now. So you've got sort of like your basics like warrior, monk, black mage, white mage, and that sort of thing. And then you've got sort of more interesting stuff out there, like you've got red mages in there, you've got dancer, you've got beastmaster. And so across all the course of the game, you'll find this like massive mix of different characters that you can put in your party for a very different feel and a very different experience to the game as you play through. Or if you want to, you can just stick with the basic ones that you get towards the beginning of the game. They give you like a basic tank, a basic healer, a basic damage dealer. And yeah, it lets you romp through the early levels of the game much more easily than you would have done in the past, which is great. And alongside that, they've added a much more robust quest system in there as well. So there were always quests and missions in Final Fantasy XI. So quests were sort of things you talk to an NPC in a town, and they'd ask you to do something, and like you might get a helpful reward from it, you might get a bunch of crap for doing it. You didn't really know. But what they added, I think around a similar time to this trust system, is they added this system called Records of Eminence. And the concept behind that is you get sold this doll called a memorandol quite early in the game, except it sort of attaches itself to you before you've paid for it, and then the scam artist is sort of left not being able to force any money out of you because it's already attached itself to you. And what the doll does is it sort of records your memories and your experiences. And the way this is implemented in the game is there's a whole bunch of different objectives in this massive list, and you can activate a bunch of them, and when you complete the objectives you get loads of experience and rewards, and you get this currency that you can use to buy better equipment and stuff, so that means you don't have to grind for gil and stuff. And so the whole experience now, while it's much easier than it was in the past, and some sort of veteran players aren't too happy about that, it just means that you can jump into Final Fantasy XI in 2019 now and have a really good experience that
sounds great,
remarkably akin to playing a single player RPG.
You're tempting my business right now. Are you playing it on Steam or on PC or whatever?
Yes, yeah. So that's the only way you can play now, because the console version shut down in 2016, so the only place you can play it now is on PC. They were supposed to be working on a mobile client at one point, but that's never emerged at some point, and I can't imagine how you'd play this on mobile anyway. But yeah, so what I've been doing for the last couple of days, I've been making a start on recording some Final Fantasy 11 episodes that I will eventually release as part of the complete Final Fantasy marathon, and maybe release them early to patrons as well if they're interested in seeing them. But yeah, I've been having an absolute blast. It's been a really nice combination of nostalgia for the game as it was, and being able to enjoy it without monopolizing my time. And so it's sort of a best of both worlds situation. So I have this wonderful nostalgia for the point I got to back in 2002, 2003, whatever it was, when I first played it, and I think the furthest I got was about level 30, and it goes up to level 99 now. And so there's a lot of stuff in this game I haven't seen, including most of the main storyline. So I'm very excited to see how these stories play out, because they are supposed to be immensely good. So yeah, so that is the other thing I've been playing lately. So hopefully by the time the rest of my Final Fantasy marathon catches up to 11, I might have finished at least some of the main stories in that campaign. But at this rate, it's going to be quite a long series. But for those who are interested in seeing how the game plays, but maybe not in playing it, I'm looking at you, Chris. Then
I'm on the Steam page as we speak. Are they still charging $15 a month for this bad boy?
It's not quite that much, I don't think. It's I don't know what that converts to in dollars, actually. I think it's about £6 or £7 a month.
Oh, okay. So
which is not too bad. So yes, there still is a subscription fee, but when you buy a new copy, you get 30 days free. And if you play it a reasonable amount in that first month, you can get a reasonable distance through the game now. So you just have to make a bit of commitment to it. But I mean, that's no different from a regular RPG these days. It's certainly not the time sink it once was. And so yeah, I'm having an absolute blast with that in a minute. I'm really enjoying revisiting it and looking forward to what comes next. So at some point, watch out for those videos. If you're a patron, I think I will release those early for people who are curious, because I've recorded them now, so I might as well let some people see them at least. And yeah, those will be coming up in the future. And that's pretty much everything I've been playing lately, I think. So that's a fairly short segment for now, but yeah, lots to talk about in the next one. So we'll take a short break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about some gore. Yeah, okay. Yeah, see you in a moment. Welcome back. For our third segment, we wanted to talk about gory games and sort of what impact they've had on us over the years, what gory games we've encountered, and all that sort of thing. So I thought an interesting thing to talk about first would be to sort of establish a baseline of our respective attitudes towards gore and violence. So how do you feel about gore and violence in media in general, Chris?
Well, I think there's a fine line, right? So I'm a horror guy, which we've discussed a lot. I really like horror movies. I really like slashers. I really love, the old practical special effects masters from like the 80s and stuff. But I like a very specific kind of gore and violence, and the key word here being style. Yeah. So, like, I like stylized gore and violence, or gore and violence that's presented in such a way that it's cheeky, or a little bit of like a knowing nod that it's funny.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like gore and violence presented for its in a realistic fashion. I don't like human on human violence that isn't stylized. So, like, I find war unsettling, because I'm such a hippie. So like I don't like games like Call of Duty and stuff.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to be a man with a gun shooting another man, and that's that. Unless it's presented in a stylized way.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I sit. Like, I'm all about gore and violence. Like, I'm about to gush about Mortal Kombat for like 20 minutes. But But Mortal Kombat's goofy as shit. And when I play Mortal Kombat, I'm laughing so hard I'm going to piss myself. Yeah. Like, that's the kind of gore and violence I like. But, like, I'm not like a sociopath. Like, I'm not on, like, Reddit looking for, like, car accident pics. You know, like, there's a very specific type of presentation that I appreciate. And that's what we'll talk about today. Like, my initial proposal, for those of you who don't know, when we work on the podcast, we've always got a spreadsheet building of potential topics. And my phrasing when I had suggested that we do a discussion about gory games was like gory games that make us laugh, like that are stylized, that are funny and interesting, or ways that the gore has tied into mechanics in interesting ways, but not gore for gore's sake, not violence for violence's sake. And I think that line is very, very important to maintain.
Yes, definitely. So I think I have a pretty similar attitude to you. So I have a much more difficult time stomaching gore in movies and TV shows than I do in games. Sure. I mean, that sounds like it should be obvious, really, but because games, even in their current form, are much less realistic than special effects in movies and TV shows. But I know that the stuff in the movies and TV shows isn't happening, but it still squicks me out a lot more than seeing something similar happening to a game character. Like anything happening with eyes, I just can't deal with.
Oh, me too. That's my thing. I'm terrified of eye hurting.
Yeah, that is like, I can deal with most stuff. I don't necessarily like it, but I can deal with most stuff. But anything involving eyes, I actually can't watch. That's like the only thing I can't watch under any circumstances is anything that involves sort of even the risk of injury to an eye. It doesn't have to actually injure it, but if there's just the risk of injury to an eye, it just squicks me out completely. But aside from that, I mean, I've been playing gory games for quite a while, and I've kind of had varied reactions to them over the years. So I think one of the earliest examples I played wasn't necessarily a particularly gory game in its entirety, but there was one particular moment in it. And the game I want to talk about first is an old Atari ST game called Savage by Firebird. Okay. This was developed by a company called Probe, who aren't especially well known now, but a couple of the people involved with it are more well known now. So Probe, probably the most well known person from Probe was Dave Perry, who went on to make things like MDK and Jim and all that sort of thing. So yeah, this was a very early game from him, and it was a very unusual game as well because it was a 3-part game that you could load the 3 parts of it separately. And what you were supposed to do is you were supposed to play through the first part, finish that, it would give you a password. You could then go into the second part, enter this password, and it would give you more lives, so you'd have an advantage at the start of that. But if you just wanted to see what the second and third bits were like, you could load straight into those, not enter the password, and you could play it, you just have 1 life. And across the 3 components, so the first section was sort of a side-scrolling... I don't want to call it a beat 'em up because it wasn't, because you were throwing axes at things rather than hitting things, but it was kind of presented a bit like a belt scrolling beat 'em up, except you were chucking axes like you do in Ghosts and Goblins.
Oh, cool.
Then the second part was a sort of it was a first-person thing, so it was kind of like a combination of Space Harrier and Death Chase on the ZX Spectrum. So you were trying to dodge these obstacles and shoot things at the same time. So unlike Space Harrier, it's a first-person perspective, but it was still sort of the idea of looking up and down and shooting things and that kind of thing. And then the third level is where the gore side of things came in for me. So in the third section, the hero of the game forms a psychic bond with his eagle companion, and rather than going to rescue the princess himself, he sends his eagle in to rescue her instead. Which is fine. It made the third level suitably different. It made it into sort of a maze game rather than a straight side scroller. But the thing in this third segment is when the eagle got killed, it would fall to the floor with this horrendous screeching sound produced by the ST sound chip, and then it would lie there in a pool of blood that would drip down the side of the platforms. And like the rest of the game hadn't been gory at all, but when I saw this for the first time, I was like, "Whoa, I don't like that. That's not nice." And it was just an immediately really strong, visceral reaction to that. It's like I hadn't come across gore in a game before, and suddenly seeing blood from I think the fact it was seeing blood from an animal kind of added to the impact for me, because I've always been like a big animal lover and things, and seeing anything bad happening to an animal it just like really puts me off. I mean, I'm not like a vegetarian or anything like that because of it, but it's sort of like seeing any sort of injury or anything like that coming to an animal has always kind of made me feel very uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah, I think that's a pretty common.
Yeah, absolutely. And this game was really the first time that I'd encountered that in a game, and it kind of put me off playing it, because although it only happened sort of when you failed in this last stage, it was still off-putting enough to me to make me not want to play that game, which was a shame, because it's a cool game. But that was, I think, one of my earliest encounters with gore. If we contrast that with a game from the similar time period, which is Barbarian from Palace Software, which was known as Death Sword in the States, I think. This is a very well-known game from the period, and it was very well-known for two reasons. One was its violence, and the second was the fact that it was marketed and packaged with a glamour model on the front cover, which was nice. So in the end, it actually became more controversial for that latter aspect than the violence aspect, because people were concerned about the terrible influence on young children of having a page 3 model in a bikini on the front cover of a game. It's going to corrupt the youth of us. But they didn't seem to care for the fact that if you pressed the fire button and pulled in the opposite direction on the joystick to which you were facing, you could do a flying neck chop that, if you timed it correctly, would chop off your opponent's head, cause them to collapse to the floor with blood spurting from their stump of a neck, and then a goblin would wander on the screen, drag their body off, and kick their head into the distance.
Well, that's just the classic East versus West, right? Like right now with all the discussions about Sony's new censorship policies.
Yeah,
but like Mortal Kombat 11 is okay.
Yeah.
Like we must protect the children from the possibility that they might see a breast.
Yes.
But it's totally cool for them to use a razor blade fan to split a man down the middle, chop off his head, throw his head up in the air, and then throw the fan to slice his head in two horizontally as it passes between the vertically bisected sections of his torso. That's cool. That won't fuck anybody up.
No.
But shit, cleavage.
Oh my god, yeah.
Yeah, so, but it's hilarious that even like then, that was like, get rid of the page 3 model, but decapitations...
Yeah. So, interestingly, like I did not have a problem with Barbarian at all. I did not have a problem with people getting their heads cut off. Did not have a problem with sword combat with blood flying off people.
Because it wasn't your pet.
Whatsoever. Because it wasn't my pet eagle, no. But yeah, so... I think that was another early example. That got a sequel a couple of years later, which was very similar, in which you could actually play as the page 3 model as well as the Barbarian.
Game of the year.
Yeah, exactly. Incidentally, the Barbarian later became Wolf from Gladiators in this country.
Oh.
Which I don't know if that means anything to you, but British listeners will know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so Barbarian 2 wasn't quite as gory in terms of the actual combat you were doing, but there were a number of enemies who could do things like bite your head off and stuff like that. Like in the first level, there was a sort of big dragon type thing, and one of his attacks was he could bite your head off, and again, you'd crumple to the floor, and there'd be blood spurting from the stump of your neck and that sort of thing. And yeah, that didn't bother me either, because again, it wasn't my pet eagle. So, I mean... When was sort of you think your first encounter with gore in games?
I can remember...
And how did you feel about it?
I can remember very vividly playing a game for the Genesis called The Immortal.
Yes.
In my buddy Jeff's basement down the street from my house. And that was probably the first time I can really remember gore, because Genesis does what Nintendo don't. Mm-hmm. As we all know. And And in the Immortal is like, it's not really an RPG. It's more like a isometric action game. Yeah. But there's battle sequences in it. And they play like almost... It's almost like Punch-Out.
Yeah, like, I was going to say they're a bit Punch-Out-y, aren't they? There's lots of leaning and attacking and openings and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's just like isometric Punch-Out. Like it's like you're this wizard. You're just Gandalf, right? You're a wizard who has a staff in one hand and a broadsword in the other. So you're like badass wizard. And you fight these like goblins and ogres in this dungeon when you encounter them. And you're just... It's presented from an isometric perspective, and you just like swing at each other with timing and dodges, like Punch-Out. But when you win, it's just these glorious animations of like these goblins, like heads just exploding off their bodies, or just like melting into a puddle of goo. And same thing with you. Like you can be like totally wrecked. Like you can just explode and like fountains of gush. And like I just remember playing the Immortal and being that delicious like the first time you also see like a Playboy, right? Like the first time you see a naked person or of the sex you are attracted to, there's a combination of knowing that you've just seen something that you probably shouldn't have seen, then you stop and you think, and then you're like, I need to see that again. And it takes like 5 or 6 times before the feeling of like I just saw something I shouldn't see goes away and is totally replaced by I need to see that again. So like the first 5 or 6 fights in the Immortal, I was like, oh my, what have I done? And then it was like, when can we rent the Immortal again? Like, and this game is not great by like any means, and like I'm terrible at it, but I just remember these like vivid like exploding head animations, and like when you shoot the guys with your magic wand, and it's like, and like, it's like the Immortal is probably the first vivid memory I have.
Yeah.
Also, that game has hella good cover art, because it's just the sweet-ass black metal Grim Reaper, like, cutting the title in half with his scythe, and it's just, like, the most metal thing ever.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. I actually had that game on the Atari ST as well, so yes, I know exactly what you're talking about there. Yeah, so I think what we've highlighted there is what you mentioned at the beginning, which is kind of the difference between Gore as something that is purely violent and shocking, and something that is stylized and almost designed to be amusing and entertaining.
Yes.
So like if we contrast with if we contrast Savage, if we go back to Savage, like your bird getting killed is like, that's not supposed to be entertaining. That's a bad thing. It's unglamorous. It's like the horrible end of your game. It's like it's supposed to make you feel bad. Probably not as bad as I felt when I first saw it, but it is supposed to make you feel bad. Whereas when you look at the Immortal, a goblin's head exploding when you stab him in the face, that is supposed to make you feel badass and ridiculous. And I think that is sort of the distinction that we're making a bit here. So some other ones I wanted to bring up again from sort of the slightly earlier days. Next one is a little bit later. It was a game by Accolade for home computers called Waxworks. And this was a game by a company called Horrorsoft, who are probably most well known for their games based on Elvira, Mistress of the Dark.
Well, if Elvira is involved, I'm there.
This one didn't directly involve Elvira, but I think her games were quite gory as well, from what I remember. So, like their specialism was making horror games, and most of them were sort of a combination of point-and-click adventure and dungeon crawler, which is what Waxworks was. So the concept of Waxworks was you play one of two twins, and your family is under a curse from an old witch, that when twins are born into the family, one will turn out good and one will turn out evil.
That's just how it is anyway, though. It doesn't have to be a witch in my experience.
Exactly. So your twin brother has turned out to be evil, and so naturally the only way you can solve this is to go to your dead uncle's mansion, which is filled with a waxworks celebrating the evil twins from throughout the past of your family. Go back, correct history, and then everything will be absolutely fine. So what Waxworks does is it takes you through 4 distinct time periods. So you go back to the time of the pharaohs, and you're exploring a pyramid. You go to a graveyard when there's like a necromancer raising zombies in there. You go back to Victorian London when Jack the Ripper is sort of doing his thing. And what was the 4th one? You're down in the mine fighting off plant monsters or something like that.
Ooh.
So like there's a whole series of different horror tropes in there, with each of the 4 environments sort of having quite different gameplay. So like the Egyptian section was very based on exploring mazes and combat. The graveyard bit was kind of a combination of combat and puzzle solving. The Jack the Ripper bit was exclusively puzzle solving. There was no combat in that at all. So like if you got caught by a policeman in that, you would get taken away, arrested, and hung. So you had to make sure that didn't happen. But yeah, the thing with Waxworks is it had a stick on the front of the box that said "Parental warning: intense graphic violence."
Yeah.
And they were not joking. This game was the first time I ever saw intestines.
Oh, I bet that fucked you up good.
Yeah, because like I had played violent games prior to this, which we'll talk about in a moment, but I had never played something that was sort of explicitly gory in a kind of horror movie style.
Oh man!
So there are sequences in Waxworks where you come across. You sort of in your explorations of the various dungeons and mazes, you'll come across scenes that you can sort of examine in an adventure game fashion, a sort of point-and-click adventure game fashion. And one of these sequences was in the graveyard. You sort of come to this fence, and you find someone who obviously used to work in the graveyard. He was like obviously used to be a gravekeeper or something like that. And he's sort of leaned up against the fence, and you can see that he's obviously suffered some terribly traumatic injury to his abdomen. And so naturally, you click on him to go and search his body, because that's what you do in adventure games. And then it gives you this horrific close-up of like all his innards spilling out of his guts, and it's just like, whoa, what the hell? So I was not ready for that at the time.
I'm googling this shit now. This is some pretty ridiculous stuff. This is great. This is ace level horror.
So yeah, I found that really interesting, and I wasn't quite as sort of shaken up by that as I was by Savage, at least partly because I was a little bit older and I had a little bit more experience with various types of media that incorporated a bit more violence by that point. And like I say, I'd played some other violent games by that point, but it was still the first time that I'd ever seen something quite so graphic. And it was really effective. It was really effective in sort of generating the atmosphere of that thing. It gave it a very authentic feel for... I hadn't really seen many horror movies at that point, but it gave me a very effective feel for what I thought a horror movie was at that point, if you see what I mean. So sort of the image I had in my mind of what you would expect to see in a horror movie. And yeah, it worked really well from that perspective. It really added to the feeling of you never know what's going to be around the next corner. You never know if you're going to find something that's helpful to you, or if you're going to find something that is horrific and traumatizing, or if you're going to find a monster that's going to try and kill you. So yeah, it was a very distinctive part of that game's atmosphere and made it really memorable as a result. So the other gory games that I mentioned that I was playing around the time would have been... the one that sort of springs most readily to mind would be Wolfenstein 3D.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And Wolfenstein 3D it sort of really stood out to me at the time because it was the first game I saw that I felt was making its violence into a selling point.
Yes, yeah.
Because when you boot up Wolfenstein 3D, it goes through like the sort of title sequence of like Apogee Games, id Software, and so on. But then one of the first things you have on the beginning is like a voluntary warning system in the style of a kind of movie classification thing. And it says, warning, this game has been rated PC-13, profound carnage. Yeah, that was the first time I'd seen a game be upfront about its violence like that, and almost seeming to celebrate it. It's sort of like one of the first things it said when you booted up that game is, this game is violent. Enjoy. And yeah, that's exactly what you went about in Wolfenstein. Wolfenstein was a satisfying game because you were you were fighting enemies who are sort of universally understood to be evil and bad and horrible and wrong. So you're shooting Nazis, and sort of seeing them explode in showers of blood and that sort of thing was satisfying. You were being a badass and that sort of thing. But at the same time, Wolfenstein 3D also had a few really weird aspects to it as well. Like when you got below, I think it was 10% health or something like that, you could drink blood off the floor, and that gave you 1% health back.
I don't remember that.
Oh, yeah. And it makes this horrible noise when you do it as well. It sort of goes...
when you do that. Spaghetti.
Yeah, yeah. So Wolfenstein is stuck in my mind, both for being the first time that I remember violence being used as a selling point, but also it was the first time that I remember actually the violence in the game leading to a conversation with my parents.
Oh, that's a major turning point.
Yeah,
I mean, for good parents, the violence talk for good parents is what prevents you from becoming a school shooter. So it's a very important talk.
Yeah, absolutely, and I remember the context of it vividly. It's weird. I don't remember how the conversation exactly went, but I do remember the context of it, and I remember it was me and my friend Ed. Were both playing a lot of Wolfenstein at the time, and Spear of Destiny, its sort of follow-up and sequel, and we were making custom levels for it, and we were obsessed with it at the time. It was our game at the time, and we went on holiday together to this place called Center Parks, which is like a sort of holiday camp village type place where you stay in a villa in the depths of the woods, and it's lovely. And Ed came with me, so it was me and my parents and my friend. And for some reason, around the breakfast table one day, the conversation turned to Wolfenstein 3D and the violent content and stuff. And like my parents weren't too thrilled about it, but they knew to trust us. They knew that we weren't going to sort of do anything ridiculous with it. They knew that it wasn't necessarily going to corrupt us, but they still wanted to talk to us about it.
Sure.
And Ed sort of has this enduring shame to this day that, like, the one thing he said that was sort of trying to be in favour of it was, yeah, but you get used to it.
It is true.
But yeah, that didn't really help his case. But yeah, I remember that conversation happening, and I remember my parents respecting us enough to understand that we were engaging with something that was maybe... I mean, we were probably about 13 years old at the time, so we were sort of the age of the rating it was giving there. But it was up until that point, my parents had been very strict on like what movies I could watch. Like, I wasn't allowed to watch 15 rated movies or 18 rated movies until I was the right age, and they were very strict on that. And I kind of respect them for sticking to that, even though it meant that I sort of missed out on a lot of movies and a lot of conversations in the schoolyard. But yeah, whatever. But yeah, the Wolfenstein 3D sort of really sticks in my mind for that reason as well, for actually prompting a conversation, not a hysterical conversation or anything like that, but actually sort of prompting a conversation and prompting me to think about sort of the meaning of the media that I was engaging with.
Sure. Very important. I had a similar discussion about foul language after the first time I saw RoboCop.
Yeah. So, what are some other examples of stuff that you've engaged with over the years?
Well, going off of the Immortal, also Splatterhouse.
Yes.
Because like Splatterhouse is like the ultimate delight. Like if gore is your thing, right? So like you're just like, Splatterhouse is from Namco, and it is a horror themed. It's a beat 'em up, but it's not belt scrolling. Like, it's side scrolling, but it's less action focused than a traditional side scroll. It feels like a beat 'em up. Like, the enemies come at you in a specific pattern and pace, and you just kind of have to take them out. But you play as like a dude in a possessed hockey mask who's trying to rescue your girlfriend from a haunted house besieged by the occult, and every single enemy in Splatterhouse is terrifying. Like they like are all like zombies and like undead abominations, and they shamble at you in such a way that it is apparent that their mere existence is painful to them.
Yeah.
So it's really, really like intense, like body horror. And the animation and like the attention to detail and even the first Splatterhouse is ridiculous. And like you pick up weapons along the way, and this being hard, they're not always weapons. It's like improvised stuff like 2x4s and crowbars, and you smack these enemies and their like flesh tears like tissue paper. And they just crumple to the floor in like masses of like glistening meat. And like if you get the 2x4, you can smack the zombies laterally and they fly against the background.
Yes.
And actually splatter. Like, oh, Splatterhouse is so good. And like the first level, one of the early bosses is just like you're in a room, just the room is filled with gore. Like there's just body parts and meat and like pulsating organs just smeared all over the walls and in piles on the floor. And the actual boss are the demonic possessed maggots that live in the piles of meat.
Yeah.
And they come out at you, and it's just like, and this is Splatterhouse. Mm-hmm. And there's 3 games of this. And it's fantastic.
Yeah. I didn't play that back in the day, but I do remember reading about it in a magazine that my brother was working on at the time. He was working on a Mega Drive magazine, and they did a review of Splatterhouse, sort of when it was first released, I think when it was still an import. And there was a whole page of the review in the magazine was devoted to the splattering animations for the different weapons. So it was just a whole page. It was like, if you use this weapon, this is what happens to the enemies. And they just like these massive blown up pixelated things of things splattering against the background and exploding into chunks and stuff. And it was like, that's kind of cool.
I was as a child so scared of Splatterhouse that I couldn't even like go to the video rental store and like look at the box.
Yeah.
Because there's something so primally disturbing about the way the enemies look in Splatterhouse. Like I can't even like describe, like they're like all glistening and like they're all just soft and like fleshy, and like I said, like they look like they want you to kill them the way they walk at you, because they look they're these reanimated horrors, and they shamble and they moan, and it's like there's something so viscerally terrifying about Splatterhouse, but also it's an arcadey game from Namco, so it's just like a really weird special thing. And like even as an adult, sometimes the third one on the Mega Drive, there's something so primally disturbing about the sound effects and the color choice for the art and presentation, and the intertitles between the stages. They chose to digitize real people, instead of animated characters, for like your like the ghost of your girlfriend and whatever. So there's just something so primally disturbing about it. I love it.
Yeah. So I mean, I can tell from how you've talked about that you enjoy that, but it sounds like it's very close to that line between sort of gore that is genuinely horrifying and gore that is entertaining.
Yes.
So, I mean, it could be quite easy for that to go in either direction, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure there are people, like I said, like I love it, and I still have difficulty with certain scenes and characters and stuff from Splatterhouse, because it's just so over the top. But at the same time, it's goofy and stupid, and it's over the top specifically. And it's not against, and like I mentioned earlier when we were talking about like shooters I don't want to play, it's not man on man. Like there's never a point where you're like, here's a dude in jeans and a t-shirt, let's hit him with the 2x4. Like that's not a thing that happens. So it's okay.
So I mean I mostly feel that way, but then there are a couple of exceptions. Like if I think of Carmageddon.
Okay.
Carmageddon is technically, I guess it's human on human.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, technically, it's car on human, but
it's a sliding scale.
But yeah, Carmageddon is so utterly ridiculous and deliberately stylized in such a way to be amusing. It knows that the situation is so ridiculous that I mean, if you saw it in reality, yes, of course it would be horrifying. But in Carmageddon, because of the exaggerated physics, because of the ridiculous car models, because of the ridiculous combination of human characters who populate each of the tracks, it's hilarious. And
though intent is the key here, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
If you could hit people, like if you were playing Gran Turismo, you could hit your pit crew. And they just died realistically in Gran Turismo. That would be horrible.
Yes.
But this is Carmageddon. Yes. This is a thing called Carmageddon.
Yes, exactly. But I mean they're just people. Like, they're not bad people. Like, you're running over old ladies and women in bikinis and like fat people and like just dudes and cows and all sorts of things. And like again, sliding scale, it could be horrifying, but just because of the way it's presented, it is incredibly amusing. Like, there's little things like the replay function in Carmageddon. The replay function in Carmageddon is one of the most masterful replay systems I've ever seen, because it knows how to pick the perfect camera angle to make it the most amusing situation possible. Ooh. So what it does, it records like a significant chunk of your gameplay at any one time, and you can just tap a key on the keyboard to go into replay mode and play this stuff back. And like the default camera mode, it does stuff like when you get a particularly spectacular or interesting kill on a human, what it will do is it will move the camera away from your car, and it will just show the human just sort of wandering around and minding their own business, and then your car will like fall out of the sky onto their head or something like that. And it's just the most hilarious thing imaginable. Just like I remember me and my friends just spending hours playing the original demo version of Carmageddon and just playing with that replay function, just because we would be pissing ourselves with laughter every time that particular situation came up, and it came up a lot.
Yeah.
And so yeah, you're absolutely right. Intent is very important. So Carmageddon was designed from the outset to be ridiculous and silly and like over the top and humorous. Like you can tell just from the tone of everything about Carmageddon, from the packaging to the manual to the text in the game. It's not supposed to be serious. It's supposed to be funny and full of puns and violence for amusement's sake.
Abstraction is also important. For instance, I have difficulty with 3D Grand Theft Auto. Mm-hmm. Like 3D Grand Theft Auto, I play like letter of the law. Like I drive on the street. I only kill other mobsters or whatever that are trying to kill me, like, because it's realistic enough and the characters are portrayed as people.
Yeah. I'm exactly the same.
Grand Theft Auto 1 and 2, I steal an ambulance and drive on the sidewalk. It's like
run over the line of Hare Krishnas and Goranga bonus.
Yeah. Like, so it's like the abstraction, presentation, intent, it's all part of the picture. As Grand Theft Auto became more serious and the humans became humans, instead of pixelated lumps that were meant points to me.
Yeah.
And like, and the old Grand Theft Autos were arcadey. Like, so like there'd be like cheering sounds and goofy sound effects, and so it was different. But so, like I know where the line is for me, and I know where my comfort lies.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, modern Grand Theft Autos for me are about enjoying the world and sort of the simulation of the different vehicles and exploring and that sort of thing. It's like, no, I used to enjoy like sort of the rampage stuff in Grand Theft Auto 3 and Vice City. Yeah. But sort of from San Andreas onwards, it just didn't quite feel right to do that anymore.
Yes. Yeah.
Just because they were putting a lot more effort into the protagonist at that point as well. Yeah. As a character.
Yeah.
And so like CJ in San Andreas didn't feel like someone who would go on a murderous rampage just for the sake of it. It didn't seem right for him to do that. And the same for Grand Theft Auto 5. I mean Trevor is the obvious exception in Grand Theft Auto 5, but even then I felt a bit uncomfortable doing that. So, yeah, interesting situation. One other game I wanted to bring up is another reasonably recent one. We're jumping quite forward here, so feel free to jump back after I've talked about this. But, is Until Dawn on PS4.
Oh, that's that one that's basically like an interactive slasher movie, right?
Yeah. So Until Dawn is It's a game. It sort of unfolds a bit like a David Cage game in terms of you sort of work your way through various scenes and you move around, you interact with objects, and you have sort of choices to make and that sort of thing. And there's occasional quick time events and so on. But its main kind of shtick is that, yeah, as you say, it's supposed to be sort of. I don't know if I want to call it a deconstruction, but it's certainly exploring the tropes of kind of late 90s horror movies, things like Scream and stuff like that. So the setup is very sort of late 90s slasher flick. So it's like a bunch of teens go into a remote cabin up in the mountains and bad things start happening. But the thing with Until Dawn is it sort of systematically starts working through pretty much every horror trope you can possibly think of along the way, and part of the narrative is kind of working out which ones are actually happening and which ones are just sort of people messing with you, because there's a significant part of the story that is sort of like certain characters trying to mess with the rest of the cast for various reasons, but then at the same time there is horrific stuff that is actually happening as well. And so sort of getting the best ending in the game and sort of making sure that everyone survives is a matter of understanding what kind of horror you're experiencing, if you're experiencing simulated horror or genuine horror. And so there's a bunch of scenes throughout that sort of when they first happen, you think, oh my God, that's horrific, that's horrible, that can't possibly have happened. And then you think, well, maybe it didn't actually happen, because it leaves clues around the place that sort of provide sort of potential ways for you to uncover sort of the truth behind these things that are happening. Like this is probably a spoiler, but I mean the game's been out a while now, so I will spoil certain bits of it. There's a sequence early on where one of the characters finds themselves they've been sort of pursuing who they assume to be this psychopath killer. And they find themselves in sort of a hut up on the mountain. And they look through a window, and two of their friends are attached to... They're sort of tied up on a wall. And there's like a circular saw sort of slowly advancing towards them. And the character who's not tied up is given a choice between saving one or the other of these characters. And the choice that most people will make is pretty obvious, to such a degree that every playthrough I've seen, people have made this one choice. They save the girl and they let the boy die. I've never seen anyone do anything different. I don't even know if it's possible to select differently. But what happens when the boy dies is that he sort of gets chopped up by the sword. You see this excruciatingly graphic detail, the sort of intestines flopping out and blood everywhere and that sort of thing. But later in the game, you discovered that was faked. It was the boy who was sticking his head through a hole at the top, and it was a dummy filled with like pig intestines and stuff like that. So once you learn that information there, you start questioning whether the other stuff that is going on in that game is real as well, and whether you should be horrified at the stuff that's going on, or if it's just something that you should be skeptical about. And yeah, it just makes for a really interesting experience, a really interesting kind of adventure game style experience that has lots of different endings and lots of different ways you can kind of interpret the relationships between the characters and how they interact with one another. So it's a really good example of a horror game that it kind of uses gore quite sparingly. There is a fair amount of gore in it, but it uses it quite effectively. It doesn't really use it in the way that we've described, that it's amusing, but it uses it in an effective, horrific manner that doesn't sort of overstay its welcome. Sure, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Well, that's what good horror does. Like if the gore is too copious, it's not effective. I mean, we're talking about gore in a lot of different contexts, and there's a very different way to the way good horror uses gore to the way something that's stylized and goofy uses gore.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Yes. And then you have there's stylized and goofy, and then there's excessive, isn't there? Just to try and be I'm trying to think of a specific example, and I'm struggling to think up with one. But yeah, I'm just sort of thinking the difference between sort of the ridiculous, goofy gore of something like, say, the original Quake or something like that, when you could jib people.
Yeah.
And contrast that with something that just makes everything splatter into bloody chunks just for no real reason, just for the sake of it, really. I mean, I'm sure there's games. I'm thinking that probably the sort of asset flip type games you get on Steam are probably the sort of place where you'd see that. They are just violent for the sake of it. They're not trying to say anything.
What's that first person shooter that a lot of people like, Killing Floor?
Oh yeah.
That's pretty just like, oh, we've got blood, guys. Like that's
yeah.
Like, I'm kind of turned off by the whole like vibe of that game.
Yeah, I mean, Killing Floor is supposed to be quite a good game, but
yeah, I hear it's good.
Yeah, but no, I know what you mean. It does seem to sort of be playing up on the sort of edgy violence thing, and it is a really fine line with that, because sometimes it can really work. Because like, I remember people going nuts for Bulletstorm a few years back.
Oh, I like that game.
Yeah, and Bulletstorm was a really good example of how to do this right, because it was kind of exaggerated and over the top, and it was kind of self-referential about it, and it knew how stupid it was. It knew that the amount of violence it was putting in there was absolutely stupid.
We're supposed to be getting a remaster of that soon, aren't we? On like the PS4? Did that come out already?
Happen?
It might have. I haven't been following it closely, but yeah. I love that game.
Yeah. I think it came out a while back. Yeah, that was really cool. That was a really good example of how to do it properly. But then I'm sure there's plenty of other examples out there of games that just decide to be bloody and gory just for the sake of it. Yeah. So.
I mean, those aren't the kind of games I play, so I don't really, I don't know. I can't list any, because when I see them, I avoid them.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm the same. I tend not to play a lot of violent games these days anyway. I mean, I tend to a lot of the time avoid games that look like they have particularly kind of grim and dark atmospheres. I mean, there's occasional horror games that I like, but these days I tend to find that I prefer the more kind of psychological side of horror. So, which is why I liked Project Zero so much, why I like Silent Hill so much, because they don't emphasize the sort of gory side of things. I mean, Silent Hill's definitely got horrific monsters in it, and Project Zero has also got. Project Zero is interesting because it's got lots of implied violence.
Oh, yeah, well, the violence has happened. Yeah. The ghosts have had the violence done to them when you find them,
Yes. But there are a couple of situations in Project Zero where you sort of see what was happening to one of the ghosts, and then it stops just short of the actual violent act happening.
Sure.
But you still kind of feel it, and that's really effective as well. That's really effective use of it.
Good horror knows that imagination is the most powerful tool.
Definitely.
But yeah, I mean, we talking about survival horror, like Resident Evil is an example of a survival horror game with more gore, and it's also an example of like, I don't like Resident Evil. Like I like Silent Hill. But then like on my list of games I wanted to talk about today that I do like, that I think is cool, is I like Dead Space a lot.
Yes.
And Dead Space, what I like about Dead Space is we've been talking about gore a lot as like a presentational choice, but Dead Space is a game where the actual gore and dismemberment is important to the game mechanically. It's actually tied to the way the game plays.
Okay.
So like,
I've not played Dead Space, so yeah, tell me about that.
So like Dead Space, you play as an engineer in this space colony. And I've only played the first Dead Space, but I think the other two follow suit with this. But you play as an engineer, not a soldier. So the majority of your quote-unquote weapons are actually tools.
Yeah.
Like saws or like laser cutting devices or like rivet guns and stuff like that. Like your weapons aren't weapons. So a lot of them are designed to cut specifically. And and the whole deal with the enemies is they're kind of these possessed humans that like sprout like tentacles with like scythes on the end of them and like crazy limbs, and to simply shoot the enemies in the torso in like the thick part of their bodies is not enough to stop them. So the best way to survive in Dead Space is to use these tools you have, which are cutting tools, to remove the limbs of the enemies before they get to you.
Oh, okay.
So the way you actually strategize combat as it's happening is to prioritize the enemies that are closest to you and systematically remove their limbs. So like one of the weapons you get, that's like the shotgun weapon with a widespread. The alt fire actually changes whether it fires the wave of laser that cuts vertically or horizontally.
Yeah.
So it's basically like you're choosing leg or head removal and arm removal. And like, so like when you're playing Dead Space right, it's just this like magical orchestra of like arms flying off and like legs flying off and like falling to the ground, because everything has physics at this point, right? We're in the PS3 era. And you're just producing these piles of like mutilated stumps with your like circular saw launcher. And and like it's gory, and like everything has a good squishy, like, you know, there was a guy in a sound room with a Ziploc bag full of ground beef, just like punching it. And like everything is squishy and delightful, and everything falls with a weighty thud, and you're just removing limbs with your tools, and it's great. In space. So sometimes there's no gravity. Yeah. So sometimes the limbs just float away. And this is exceedingly satisfying.
Yes, I know Dead Space is very well regarded. It's one that I've never really got around to trying, but I remember people really liked it back when it first released, and sort of it continues to be quite fondly regarded ever since. So I think 1 and 2 in particular are supposed to be very good. 3 people didn't like quite so much because that was around the time that EA started being a bit more EA than they had been previously.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely.
3 from what I understand, is still worth playing because of the narrative. But it is codified full of, like, free-to-play BS. Like, currencies you can buy online for your upgrades and DLC garbage. But 1 is still, to most people, the best. Because, from what I understand, 2 emphasized the combat a bit too much and downplayed the horror.
Yeah.
But 1 was a tight, like, horror game full of good jump scares and moments of stage design that created genuine fear. Yeah, so that I had written down to talk about today. In a similar vein, I also wanted to mention the modern remakes of Shadow Warrior.
Oh, yes.
Because
definitely.
You get that sweet, you have your katana, and you're just like, arms everywhere. No more arms for you, bad guy.
Well, I mean, the original Shadow Warrior was like that as well, because you had the katana in that as well, and it was the first game I'd seen where sort of engaging in hand-to-hand combat in a first-person game would actually splatter you with blood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So like you chop someone up in the original Shadow Warrior, and the sprite which represented you holding your katana would actually get bloodstains all over it.
Yeah.
That was the first time I'd seen that. But that's really played up nicely in the newer ones. The new ones have such satisfying melee combat. They've got a really good sort of a system of triggering special moves and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's not something I'd seen done from a first-person perspective before, and it works brilliantly in those games. They're so satisfying.
When you are at, like, the peak of the first one, and you have that move that sends the sideways shockwave out from your sword, and you walk into a room, and it's just full of, like, goblins, and you do that, aim it downward slightly, and you just remove, like, 15 monsters' legs in one shot. And you just see all the limbs scatter, and just the torsos all drop to the floor simultaneously. It is... Shadow Warrior is so satisfying. And then, like, Wang makes some, like, ridiculous combat about, like chicken wings for dinner, like whatever, like it's like with like offensive stereotypical accent. Or like, oh god, that game. I love those games.
Oh, it's so good, so good. I need to replay those at some point. They're wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
I still have to play the second one. I haven't played the second one yet.
The second one is really interesting because they take a lot of the satisfying mechanics of the first one and then throw it into a completely different game structure, and a lot of people really didn't like that, but I think it works really, really well. So
that's got more of like a hub world with like a focus on like Diablo style loot collecting, right?
It's basically first person Diablo, sort of, even more than something like Borderlands. So you and it's got an interesting upgrade system as well, in that you sort of collect a bunch of weapons, and once you've got the weapons, you tend not to sort of get too many new ones. So there's quite a small number of weapons, but what most of the loot are things that you can plug into those weapons, and they affect how they work. So you might affect the type of damage they do, or how much additional damage they do, or if they attack certain types of enemy more effectively, or that kind of thing. So there's an absolute ton of customization in that game that was a bit much for some people, but if you like your loot whoring and if you like your min-maxing, then you'll have a dream of a time in that game. It's wonderful. And it has the final boss fight has music by Stan Bush.
Oh yeah, that's exciting. Well, the first one had You've Got the Touch, right, when Wang's riding in the car, and that was really awesome.
Yeah, it's incredible. All right. Any other stuff you wanted to mention?
Yeah, I did. I was just like going off of that. I just find Diablo 3 is a great example of just like stylized gore linked to the satisfying gameplay loop already. So like I'm just thinking like back to like Christmas time when we both got the Switch version. And like, do you remember I was playing the Necromancer for the first time, and the Necromancer gets that move where the enemy corpses become bombs that you can detonate for area of effect damage. And I just remember chaining like 20 corpse explosions down a line, and like I was just laughing hysterically to the point where I like had to stop because like, the giblets in Diablo 3, everything just explodes like your sword is like covered in dynamite, like and like guts and slime and I love me some Diablo.
Yeah, it's weird. Like I don't think of Diablo as a gory game, but it's incredibly gory when you think about it.
It is.
But like when I'm playing it, I just think it's just a ridiculous action game that just happens to. But yeah, no, you think about it, it is incredibly violent. But like at the time, I just think, oh, this is ridiculous. This is brilliant. I love this. I love playing a character that can hit people so hard their skeleton flies out of their back.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah,
and like I said, it's all tied together. So like it's not just the gore from a presentation standpoint, but I've mentioned a couple times like sound design is a really important part of gore.
Yes, definitely.
So like, and Diablo nails it. Like the thud of the hits and the sound of the explosions and the sound of the giblets as they liquid rain down upon the stone floor. Like it makes you feel like king of the goddamn universe.
Yeah, definitely.
Like you were this unstoppable force of death. So, yeah, Diablo, another fine example. And I hadn't even mentioned Mortal Kombat, really. Which is the whole reason I wanted to have this conversation, was to celebrate the release of Mortal Kombat 11, which is fantastic.
Yes.
I mean, there's not much I can say about it, right? It's Mortal Kombat, but just like the recent years of these newer 3D on a 2D playing Mortal Kombats have really amped up the hit detection and exactly what we're talking about. The hit stun in modern Mortal Kombat is so good, and the level of visceral feel it lends to the violence is like unparalleled. It's so satisfying. And just every new one is just graphically better and technologically better than the last one, which means that aspect also just gets better and better and better.
Yeah.
So 11 is just unreal. And like the fatalities are incredible. Like the one boss lady does this fatality where she has like time magic, and she shoots you with her time magic and like tears your body in half vertically, and then reverses time, stitches you back together, then tears your body in half horizontally, and like and she does it before you die. Like she catches you before you die, and she just keeps doing it over and over and over again while keeping you alive. And she like plays you like an accordion like that. And like the screen fades away, like she doesn't stop. She doesn't let you like drop to the floor. Or like, it's just, I mean, I won't sit here and describe like every fatality I've seen, right? But like, that's what Mortal Kombat does best. And they just get so ridiculously inventive.
Yeah.
And the new one, 11, 9 and 10 had those X-ray attacks, right? Where you would hit and the camera would stop and it would show the skeletons. 11 doesn't have those anymore because I think they were just tired of trying to devise interesting like bone break visuals. So 11 just has what they call fatal blows now, which are basically just mini fatalities you could do in the middle of the match. Yeah. Like they're just as elaborate. And like you get like Sub-Zero like jams an icicle into both your eyes and like kicks you to the ground and like puts an axe in your groin and like grabs you by the axe in your groin, swings you around and like slams you on the ground. And it's just constant. It satisfies like every like primal need for violence that you could possibly have. And of course, most importantly, is it plays well. It's like all this stylization would mean nothing if it didn't play well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I'd also written down Time Killers, which is like going back to like what are some of the earliest games you remember as being gory. Like I don't know if
yes,
you have any experience with this monstrosity.
No, but yeah, tell me.
So Time Killers was part of like the a very different kind of Me Too movement, and by that I'm talking about the Me Too movement where everyone in the 90s felt like they had to make Mortal Kombat. Yeah. To compete with Mortal Kombat. So the name of the company was Strata, and they made this ridiculous fighting game called Time Killers, where it was every character is stupid, and it's exactly what you expect. There's a knight, there's a Viking, you know, there's an alien, and it's this goofy Western developed 2D fighting game with just cartoony sprite work. But what was different about Time Killers was the actual arcade cabinet. Like, there was a Genesis version, but the arcade version's where it's at, obviously. The buttons were actually mapped out on a drawing of a person.
Oh, okay.
Instead of like typical 6-button layout.
Yeah.
So there's on the arcade cabinet you've got your joystick, and then a drawing of a person with a button on each arm, each leg, and your head. Because in Time Killers, everyone has a bladed weapon, and if you land that hit just right, the limbs come off. So in Time Killers, it's theoretically possible that the only thing you've got left is your head, and you have to use the head button to try to headbutt your way to victory. And it's ridiculous. And there's like a punk dude with a chainsaw. There's a mantis, like a giant human-sized mantis with big scythe arms, and it's a goofy, cartoony fighting game where you are removing people's limbs, and you can remove their legs. If there's certain moves you can do that just do a fatality, like ends the match immediately because you decapitate the person with like a spin attack. Yeah. They also made a follow-up, which was awesomely called Bulletstorm. Which just sounds like The Simpsons making fun of Mortal Kombat. Like if The Simpsons made fun... because The Simpsons did make fun of Mortal Kombat, and it was called Bone Storm. But yeah, there is a game called Bloodstorm that's also like a goofy like fighting game where you can remove limbs, and that was the sequel to Time Killers. Bloodstorm plays better, but I like Time Killers more because it's goofier and has a stupid cartoony presentation. Bloodstorm gets away from that a little, and it has like pre-rendered backgrounds and stuff, so it doesn't sit as near to my heart as Time Killers does.
Taking itself too seriously.
Yeah. But hilarious bit of news is that Strata, the company that made these games, was eventually recruited by Capcom, and they made the ridiculous not Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter the movie, the game.
Oh, God.
It was the same developers. So, yeah, that's all I had, I think. Oh, and also Koji Igarashi's Nano Breaker, which I don't want to talk too much about because I think one day we should do a really cool episode about 3D character action games.
Yeah,
and I think a discussion about Nano Breaker is better suited to that because it really, at its core, it really is like a Devil May Cry style game with a lot of emphasis on weapon collecting and combos. But Nano Breaker, when you kill the enemies, it's just fountains of blood, and it stays, and you like wade through it, and like there's an actual status. If you go into the status screen, there's a stat of how many gallons of blood you've spilled.
Awesome.
It actually tracks that, which is awesome.
I approve.
Yeah, it's good. So that's everything I had.
Yeah, so we'll save more in-depth discussion on that for another day. Yeah. But we've talked for an hour about Gore.
Yeah,
that's impressive stuff.
Blood and guts, baby.
Stuff. So, blood and guts, gotta love it. Key part of video gaming history. Anyway, let's wrap that up there. So, would you like to tell people where to find you online, as usual?
Absolutely. I am all over Tumblr, Twittergram, Instagram, and Twitter as Mr. Gilder Pixels. I also post my artwork when it's complete at mrgilderpixels.com. But social networking is the way to go if you want to hit me up for new ideas or check out Works in Progress because I like to post stuff as I'm doing it.
Cool. And of course, you can find me at MoeGamer.net. I'm not really actively checking social media at the minute, so if you want to get in touch with me, the best way to do so is probably via MoeGamer.net's contact page. So if you want to talk to me about anything, then feel free to drop me a line. Yeah, okay. So, as always, thank you very much for listening and or watching, and we shall see you again next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please help out the channel by leaving a like or a comment and subscribing. Be sure to check out MoeGamer.net for new articles on Japanese and Japanese-inspired video games, new and old, every weekday. Every month, MoeGamer features an in-depth exploration of an individual game or series as its cover game, so be sure to check the archives to see if your favourite has had a deep dive yet. If you'd like to support the site directly, please consider becoming a patron or buy me a coffee. You can find links to do both down in the video description. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.